Hello, everybody. My name is Anurag Sarin. I'm a senior software engineer in Azure Data Lake Storage team. Today, I'm going to show you a demo of how you could migrate your Azure Data Lake Storage account, in other words, the ADLS Gen1 account, to the ADLS Gen2 account using the Azure portal. As you know that on February 29, 2024, the ADLS Gen 1 service will be retired. And we have this new service called the ADLS Gen 2 service, which has more advantages over Gen 1 service. We're now requesting all our customers to migrate to Gen 2. To help you migrate from ADLS Gen 1 to Gen 2, we have a service which you can use using the Azure portal. Let's jump into the demo right away. Here is my Gen 1 account, the Gen 1 demo, and this has some data. This has two folders, data 1 with file 1 and data 2 with file 2. And as you see, we have a migrate data button. Now, if you don't see this button, then there's a good reason why Microsoft has not enabled your account for migration. In that case, I would request you to contact the Microsoft support so that we can work with you for the migration. Now, so for preparing for migration, we would require a new Gen 2 account. The new Gen 2 account needs to have certain properties so that it is compatible for migration. Here are the list of the properties that we need the Gen 2 account to have. The first one is that it needs to be on the same region as the Gen 1 account. So as you see, my Gen 1 account here is in the region of East US 2. So my Gen 2 account needs to be in East US 2. The replication selection for the Gen 2 account, this is a target account, on which we will do migration, needs to have LRS replication. We need to have hierarchical namespace enabled, NFS v3 disabled, and the minimum TLS version should be version 1.2. Other things to take care of is that you need to have some basic access to make sure that migration runs smoothly. If you're going to start the migration on Gen 1 account, you need to have the owner RBAC role. And for Gen 2, you need to have the storage blob data owner RBAC role. Another thing to remember is that if you have any files or directory names on Gen 1, which are ending with a dot, or the path contains a semicolon, or there are consecutive slashes on the path that is, it's like a blank folder, or a slash in together, then this path or this full file name will not be compatible on Gen 2. So we need to make sure that we rename all such files. And another very important thing is that you need to have a new Gen 2 account. And I will explain you more later on this.
A lot of our customers use Azure Data Lake Analytics accounts, also called as ADLA accounts, and they run USQL scripts on the ADLA account. ADLA account have an ADLS Gen1 account linked, as the ADLS accounts acts as a storage for the ADLA account. Such ADLS accounts which are linked with the ADLA account are not compatible for Azure portal-based migration. And if you migrate using such ADLS accounts, you will get an error on consent uh, while you are doing migration. So, if you have an ADLA account and you run workloads like and you run USQL scripts on it, you will need to move these workloads first to other services like Azure Databricks or Azure Synapse or Azure HD Insight. These services work well on ADLS Gen2 accounts. Post this workload move, you will need to delete the ADLA account. After that, you can use the Azure portal based service that we have for ADLS account migration.
While we are migrating the accounts, any writes on Gen1 are not allowed. And uh, if you write at the time of migration, you would get an error which says that the account is, which says something like the account is frozen. But while migration is happening, you could definitely read the Gen1 account. The Gen2 account, while migration is happening, is not accessible at all. While migration is happening, you can see the progress of the migration using the progress bar. I will just show that in my demo next. So let's migrate this account. So I'm ready with this my Gen1 account and my Gen2 account. So what I will do is I will click on this migrate button. So this is a subscription that I will use, and this is the target subscription where my Gen2 account will reside. This is the target resource group where my Gen2 account resides, and the storage account I am going to select from my drop down, and this would be the public demo Gen2 account. Note that if your Gen2 account does not meet any of the criteria which we talked about, like the hierarchical namespace enabled, then your account will not show up in this drop-down list. Now let's talk about copy migration versus complete migration. So copy migration is a snapshot of the Gen1 account, which is being copied to the Gen2 account. So copy migration helps our customers to take a snapshot from Gen1 and to run their tests onto the Gen2 account. And you could verify that your applications run well on the Gen2 account. You could do your testing, or you could do a POC if you need to. Once you are done with your testing, you could then do the complete migration, which I will talk about in just a few minutes. Post copy migration, both Gen1 and Gen2 will be available because this is just a snapshot copy. So Gen1 is as is, and Gen2 now has your snapshot. But you have to note that after the snapshot, if you write more on the Gen1 account, then obviously there is a mismatch on the snapshot which you just took, and Gen1 has that delta extra data post migration, right? It is very important that you don't migrate to a previously used Gen2 account, like I talked about earlier. And if you've ever written to the Gen2 account, And if you go ahead and delete those containers in which you've written data, then what happens is, though you don't see that data on the Azure portal, but at the back end, they are soft deleted files which still remain for a few days. Because of the soft deleted file, the migration is not possible because we cannot validate your data because of the presence of the soft deleted file. So make sure that any account you take for any of the migration runs is a brand new, freshly made account which has no history of any writes in the past. Let's trigger our migration. So this is the consent form. And for my copy migration, which is a snapshot copy, I will select copy data to new Gen2 account, and I will check this checkbox, and I will hit the apply button. So you will see that it is initiating the migration, and once migration has initiated, you'll have the suitable message saying that migration has started. And if there are any errors, you would see them in the notification right here. So we see that the migration is in progress. And this is the progress bar which I was talking about. And then you could see the progress here. Now it says 0%. So slowly you would see that this progress bar shows the progress in terms of percentage. And once the migration finishes, then you will have the suitable message here showing that the migration is completed. So after the migration has finished, you will see that the Gen1 account appears again ready for migration. And on the Gen2 account, you will see that this is unlocked. And if you see the containers, you will have a new Gen1 container. And in the Gen1 container, the data which was there in Gen1 has been copied, and you will see that the date timestamps of the files on Gen1 have been preserved post copy. So this is a great feature for the migration service, that we preserve the date timestamps of the file on the Gen1 account after they have been migrated. So file 1 in data1 directory is of this timestamp, which is 24th August 4:22 p.m. And we go to the same data on Gen1, we see that, yes, that's the exact same timestamp. So what we just saw was that the Gen1 migration, what we just saw was that the migration has happened from Gen1 to Gen2. This was a copy migration. And post migration, both Gen1 and Gen2 are now available for you to work on. The Gen2 has the snapshot data from Gen1, right? So this is our Gen2 account, which we migrated. And now I can run my applications on this Gen2 account. I will have to make a new connection to this Gen2 account. And I can test out how does my application, I can test out how do my applications work on this new Gen2 account, which has my Gen1 data now. Please note that all your Gen1 data will be copied to a container named Gen1 inside the Gen2 account. This is what we see. And as you see, data 1 and data 2 have been copied. You cannot rename this container. There is no way to rename this container. There is also no way to give a different container name before migration. But you could copy the contents of Gen1 to another container on the Gen2 account. Post copy migration, you can test out your applications onto Gen2, and when you're ready, you could migrate again, and this time you could use complete migration to migrate your data to a new Gen2 account. Now you have to make sure that whenever you are doing a migration, copy migration or complete migration, you have to use a new Gen2 account which has no history of data ever written. So now when I want to do a new migration from the same Gen1 account to a new account, right? And this time I want to select complete migration, right? So this is when I cannot use the same account. So as you see that we already have certain checks where we give an error that you should not have any data onto the Gen2 account and the destination Gen2 account that you give. If you would like to choose between copy migration versus complete migration, here are some of the ideas. You could use copy migration to do migration once, and you would have business continuity for your Gen1 account, because after migration is done, the Gen1 account stays as is and business goes on as on the Gen1 account. But your Gen2 account is available with that data which resides on Gen1. So you could do all your testing and you could do all your testing on Gen2. And once you're satisfied, you could do a new migration from your Gen1 account to a new Gen2 account. And this time it could be a complete migration. And in a complete migration, you cannot access your Gen1 account. And there is something called as a Gen1 compatibility layer, which I will talk about in a few minutes. And another way to do the migration is that you use copy migration, and post migration, you delete the Gen1 account. So you would just have the Gen2 account, and your applications can connect to Gen2 account post migration. But you would have to make sure that none of your applications connect to the Gen1 account. So if you want to plan that way, that is one way to do it. Now let's talk about complete migration. So when we do complete migration, the same things apply while we are doing migration, that the writes are not allowed, but the reads are allowed on Gen1. Gen2 will not be accessible while migration is on. And of course, you can see the progress the same way you saw while doing the copy migration. So let me get back, and what I would do now is I would do migration on a new account. So this is the new account that I will use for migration, and the same properties need to be there for migration to work, which is it has to be in the same location. It has to be replication has to be LRS. The hierarchical namespace has to be enabled. NFS v3 has to be disabled, and the minimum TLS version has to be 1.2. So this time, let me select the complete migration. So what we're trying to simulate here is that on the first time we did copy migration and we tested out the Gen2 account with the migrated data. After and once we are satisfied with our testing and we know all our applications work on the Gen2 account, and on the Gen1 side, there is some data that has already come up. So this time we could select a complete migration, and post the complete migration, the Gen1 account will not be usable. But if your applications write on to the same URI of Gen1, then what we call as the Gen1 compatibility layer, that is going to work, where it will redirect all those calls to the Gen2 account. So it'll look like you would be writing to the Gen1 account, but actually you will be writing to the Gen2 account. And same for reads. So your application would send a read IO to the Gen1 account, but they'll get redirected to Gen2. And the applications would get an impression that I'm reading and writing on Gen1 account. But please understand that post migration, post complete migration, you will not be able to access the Gen1 account, right? So this is just redirection, which will happen because of the Gen1 compatibility layer. Now, a Gen1 compatibility layer is not really a recommended solution. It's a solution that you could use just for a short time, because Gen1 compatibility layer has the same end of life or the same retirement date as the Gen1 account, which is February 2024. And then there are other reasons where which has been documented in our public article. And if I could just take you to that page. So as we see here, these are the various SDKs and the various versions which are not compatible for the Gen1 to Gen2 compatibility layer. You need to be, if you're using any one of the .NET, Java, or Python SDKs, then its version has to be more than the version described here. Apart from this, there are certain APIs which do not work on the Gen1 compatibility layer. So they have been listed here. So that is the reason we don't recommend the Gen1 compatibility layer to be used and to be relied upon. But if you're not using these APIs, and if you are above these versions, you could use this for some time if you need some time to transition to the Gen2 account. So this definitely can be useful in those scenarios. So now let's go back and select the complete migration. And so this is the consent page. We consent in the same way. here you can read this information that our account was copied to the public demo Gen2 account. This was our initial copy migration, right? And now we're doing a new migration where we have selected the complete migration mode. And please know that I've used a different Gen2 account, which is freshly made and it has no history of any writes. So let's go and hit, so this is the consent page, and let's go and hit apply. So you would see that the same way as copy migration, we will see that the initiation has started and it would post that the migration is in progress. So here is the progress bar, and you could monitor the progress on this page. The migration time can go up based on the data of the Gen1 account. So at this time on, if we look at our Gen1 account, you would see that it gives and it tells us that the container page is unavailable because currently the migration is going on, right? So this is what I mean, that this is what I meant when I talked about that the Gen2 account is not accessible while we are in migration. And on your Gen1 account, you would get a message saying that the account is under migration. And if you see the data, I mean, you can read the data like I had shared earlier, and like this is the data which we have. But as you see that, you know, the upload button and the new folder button is disabled, so you will not be able to write any data using the portal or using the applications or using through an SDK. So and if you make a write call to the Gen1 account, you would get a suitable error which suggests that the migration is in progress. So after some time, when the migration has finished, you can expect a message like this. So this shows that the migration has finished. And as it says that the account will be decommissioned after 30 days. So I'll just explain about this in a few minutes. So, and it says that you will not be able to use a Gen1 account. And what that means is that if you go to the Data Explorer and try to look at the data, then you would get an error. Now the Gen1 account here, the data has moved to the Gen2 account, and this is the Gen2 account. So this was the last error we saw. And what I expect now is that if I come back to this container page, then yeah, I can see the data now. So what has happened now is that the Gen2 account, which was not accessible while migration was going on, now is accessible and has the new Gen1 container. And inside the Gen1 container, we have our Gen1 data, right? And as you see that it preserves the same timestamps as Gen1, which we saw earlier in the earlier migration. What we just saw was that we have done a complete migration. On the Gen1 account, you cannot access the data. And if your applications use the SDK and try to read and write on the Gen1 account, they will be redirected to this Gen2 account. So it'll appear as if you're reading and writing from the Gen1 account, but actually the calls are being made to the Gen2 account by the application compatibility layer, like we just discussed. before. So after 30 days from the backend, the data of Gen1 demo, the data which was residing earlier in the cloud storage will be deleted. Now, please note that after migration, there is no way that you could access that Gen1 data, I mean, your data has been copied to Gen2, so you can access Gen2 data. You could, do a write on a URI which is of the Gen1 URI, but you'll be redirected to Gen2. But what you have to understand is you cannot access the Gen1 data, right? Because that's redirection, and you've been redirected to Gen2 because of the application compatibility layer. And of course, there is Gen2. You can access your original data from Gen1 onto the Gen2 account, but there is no way to get into Gen1 account and access that data which has been copied. Again, the copied data resides here, which you can access on the Gen2 account. So after 30 days, you could delete the Gen1 account from the portal if you are not using the Gen1 compatibility layer. If you want to use the Gen1 compatibility layer, you can let the Gen1 account be, and your calls will be redirected to Gen2. The moment the Gen1 account is deleted, then the application compatibility layer will also cease to exist. So this is something that you need to take care of after migration. And I think I did make this point clear that there is no way to access the original Gen1 data on Gen1, on the Gen1 account. But this has been copied to Gen2 by the migration, right? So you connect to Gen2 directly, or you use the application compatibility layer where you write on Gen1 and you get redirected to Gen2, right? So that's the difference. After 30 days, the Gen1 data, which I talked about that you cannot access, will be deleted from the backend. But the Gen1 account will be visible till you actually go and delete it, right? So deletion of Gen1 account will always be controlled by the user. But Microsoft will delete the original data which was kept on Gen1 after 30 days of migration, right? So I hope I've made that point clear. So let's cover the post-migration points that we should be aware of. If you selected copy migration, then after migration, both reads and writes are allowed on both Gen1 and Gen2. So Gen1 is open, you could do your reads and writes there, you could carry on your business as usual, and Gen2 is now available with a snapshot, and you could use Gen2 with the migrated data. If you selected the complete migration, so you could do your reads and writes on Gen2 directly, or you could use a compatibility layer where you would do a read and write onto the Gen1 URI, but you'll be redirected to Gen2 internally. After complete migration, the data is always coming from Gen2, right? You cannot access the Gen1 data ever. And as we saw that the data after migration would reside on the Gen1 container on the Gen2 account. And you cannot rename the Gen1 container, but you could always copy the data from the Gen1 container to a new container on Gen2.